there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making a mallet. Well, in my constant quest to use up as much scrap stock in my shop as I can, we're going to be venturing into making a mallet today. And there are many different ways you can make a mallet. You can make it in a solid head form or a laminated style. You can turn one on the lathe. No way is right or wrong, and each one has its place in the shop. But today we're going to be doing a laminated style. And for that, we're going to be heading to the wood rack and pulling out whatever we can in the 3/4 inch thick stock category. And we're going to go from there. I've gone through the scrap pile and I found some pieces of stock 3/4 of an inch in thickness. I found a piece of maple that will be perfect for the handle, and I've got a chunk of walnut and a chunk of mahogany. A little bit of a mishmash, but it's a mallet, or as I like to call it, a whackometer. So what you want to do is you want to cut some stock. Forget about the handle for now, but you want to cut some stock and you want to make it 3 inches wide and you want it 6 inches long. You want 3 of those pieces. So I'm going to do 2 of those in walnut and 1 in the mahogany. The 3 blocks are cut, and truth be told, I cut them a little proud of the measurements. 3 1/4 wide by 6 1/2, and that's just to give me that little bit of wiggle room that you guys know that I really like to have. As well, I have the piece for the handle, and that is 3/4 of an inch wide, 3/4 of an inch thick, 1 1/2 wide, and it's 12 1/2 inches long. This is where we're going to start with the build, and that'll be the handle. So I'm going to put these pieces aside here, and what I've done is I've made a 2-degree taper, or marked a 2-degree taper in this handle. And for that I've used a protractor, but if you don't have a protractor, what you can do is at the bottom of the handle, this measurement that you end up with after your taper is drawn is 5/8 of an inch. So if you center that 5/8 of an inch measurement and then draw a line from here right up to the top corners, you will end up with a 2-degree taper. Now that I have that taper drawn, I'm going to cut it, but I'm going to use the scroll saw and clean it up with a hand plane. And what I'm trying to do here with this build is make it so that those of you who may not have a taper jig or that sort of thing can still make a mallet and still get the proper measurements. So I'm going to take it over, cut this on the scroll saw, and then clean it up with the hand plane. And there's our taper. We'll just take a straight edge to it just to see how we did. And actually it's pretty good. So the handle is shaped. And now we're going to head over to our other pieces and cut our center block. And for that I'm going to show you what it is that you need to do. Well, because I have 2 walnut pieces, these will be my outer sides for my mallet, and the mahogany will be the center. So what I have to do with this particular piece is cut it in half, but I need to match the angle so that the handle fits in correctly. So in the middle here, I'm going to cut a 2-degree angle on either side. Now, the way I'm going to do it though is I'm going to cut each edge at 2 degrees, and once I get the edges cut, then I'll just slice it up the middle. So here is one of our blocks of walnut, and this is our mahogany just as it came off the table saw. At this point, with the 90-degree cut in the middle here and our 2-degree bevels or angles cut on either side, you're going to flip these two pieces, and you can see that there is a definite bevel there, and then our handle will go in the middle, just like so. So you can start to see here how our glue up is going to go. And that will be our next step at this point, will be to glue this particular section up. The reason we left a little bit of wiggle room in our blocks is because it's a possibility that this glue up is going to shift a bit, and I'd like to have nice flush edges here. Don't worry about this overhang on the edges. We're going to trim that up a little later. But let's go ahead and get going with this glue up. And what we're going to do to start that off is mark a center line on our piece of walnut and a center line on our handle so that we know how to line this up dead center. So for this particular glue up, I want to have this handle protruding about 3/8 of an inch above the head of the mallet. So I've put that mark there, and I've just roughly lined up the center lines there. It doesn't have to be exact. I'm going to take this edge piece here, and I'm going to line this up now so that it's butted up tight against my handle here, and that the edges are square here. And I'm going to hold it in place, remove my handle, and just score a line there or mark a line with my pencil. At this point, I'm just going to lay out some glue on here, sit this down in the place where I've placed that line, and a tool you don't see very often in my shop, but I'm going to use an air nailer just to smack a couple nails in there and hold it in place so it doesn't shift. Because once I get that glued in place, I'm going to place the handle there, wedge this piece against the handle, glue it in, a couple nails, and I want to pop that handle back out of there at that point because I need to continue on with shaping the head and I don't want the handle in my way. So, time to glue this up. Well, we've got that first piece glued in place. We've cleaned up the squeeze out, and I'm just going to apply the glue to this piece here. And it's as simple as lining up your handle where you want it, tight against that first piece with that 3/8 of an inch overhang. It could be less if you want. And then place this middle block where tight up against your handle, and just to help you hold it, shoot a couple nails in it, and I'm going to pull my handle out of here And I'm going to clean up the squeeze out and clamp this up. Well, now this isn't clamped up just yet and it isn't quite dry. You can see how our handle just slides right in there and wedges in there nicely. It's a nice hold, a nice fit. But we need to get our top piece glued on. So I'm going to apply some glue. I'm going to sandwich this on top just like that and clamp this together, and then we're going to let this whole assembly dry completely. This will end up being the head of our mallet. So let's go ahead, clamp that up, and sit back and wait for a while. We're kind of at a standstill now until that glue dries. But that's no big deal. Once it's dried, we'll carry on. But something I want to caution you with here is inside that lamination, in that hole that you've created for the handle, you want to make sure that you get in there with some wet Q-tips and really give that squeeze out a good cleaning. Any amount of squeeze out that's in there is going to hinder the fit of your handle and hinder your handle's ability to mate correctly with those pieces that you've glued in. So you really want to make sure that you clean that out well. If not, don't worry. If you get some glue in there, you can get in there with a small 1/4-inch chisel and just clean it up a little bit, and you know, Bob's your uncle, away you go. So I'm going to see you when that head dries up, and we'll carry on with the next step. Well, the glue up is dry, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take it over to the table saw, and we're going to square off these sides just to even out our glue up. That's why, of course, we left a little extra of a 1/4 inch. So take as little as you can off of the top of your mallet to square this off, and then set your fence for 3 inches and rip this to 3 inches. So everything is nice and squared off. And the next thing now is I'm going to take this over to the table saw, and from our center line out, we're going to measure on the top 2.5 inches and 2.5 inches, and we're going to cut a 7-degree bevel on either side, or sorry, a 7-degree miter, I guess you'd call it in this case, but a 7-degree cut and a 7-degree cut, 2.5 inches from center, and that should give you 5 inches at the top and 4 1/4 at the bottom. You have the taper cut, and now at the top of the mallet, I just want to make a mark to come down 3/8 of an inch from each edge here. And it's just for character. You don't have to do this, completely optional. But what we're going to do is, after I get those marks made, I'm going to use this symmetrical bow, and I'm going to put an arch at the top of this mallet, and by doing that then we're going to sand it off and just give it a little bit of character, a little extra shape. So there we go, there's our arch marked, and we're going to take that over to the disc sander and sand that off. The head is shaped, you've got that swanky little curve on the top, just like that. And now just take your handle and drop it into the tapered hole, and you want to bang it down, like drive it home a little bit, seat it in there properly. Once you get that done, we're going to mark where it exits the head of the mallet, and I'm going to run a 1/8 inch round over from that point down all the way around the handle, and as well I'm going to run that 1/8 round over all the way around each of the edges of the mallet head. Well, now that the round over is done, go ahead and get a piece of sandpaper, probably 220 grit, and give this whole thing, head and handle, a good sanding. Try not to take away any of that crisp edge on the top end of the handle that goes into the mallet head, as you still want that nice tight fit. The whole unit is sanded, rounded over, and I think a quick coat of Danish oil will finish this off just nicely. And there you have it, a shop mallet, or as I like to call it, a whackometer. Guys, this is a fantastic project. I say that about every project, but if I didn't think it was a good one, I wouldn't film it and I wouldn't post it on my show. It was a lot of fun. It's a great way to use up scrap. There's nothing more satisfying than making your own tools for the shop, and this is no different. It'll serve you for many, many years, and I mean, it looks great. I almost don't want to beat it up, but that's what it's made for, and that's what it's going to have to do. It's got a nice weight to the head, and I'm hoping to get to use this over and over on many different projects. So the angles that I cut, the 7 degrees and the 2 degrees for the handle, those things aren't rocket science. They're not exact. If you're off by a half a degree or a degree or 2 degrees or whatever you're off, it doesn't really matter. It's just the way it looks and feels that I felt the 7 degree works well. And the 2 degree for the handle, I mean, it fits in there nice. It doesn't come off, and it's all friction fit. If you want to do it with hand tools, do it with hand tools. You want to do it with power tools, use power tools. It's all up to you. So I guess the last thing I really need to do is I'm going to brand my name on this, and then when I hand this down through the generations, they'll know who made it. So thanks for watching, guys, and go make yourself a mallet. And I'll see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.